Despite that, this week is Severe Weather Awareness Week, and meteorologist Kevin Corriveau joins us now with more on terminology our team might use during any alerts.
As we enter into severe weather season, you may hear the First Alert Weather Team use different terminology to describe the potential threat heading our way. The National Weather Service describes the criteria for these levels of threat. Then they follow the type of weather expected, such as tornadoes and severe thunderstorms. The three levels of alerts are advisories, watches, and warnings. With an advisory, hazardous weather is occurring, imminent, or likely. Advisories are for less serious conditions that cause significant inconvenience and could lead to situations that may threaten life or property. With watches, they are used for when the risk of hazardous weather has increased significantly and its occurrence, location, or timing is still uncertain. It is intended to provide enough lead time so those who need to set their safety plans in motion can do so in advance of the forecasted event. And then warnings. This is issued when hazardous weather is occurring, imminent, or likely. A warning means weather conditions pose a threat to life or property, and people in the path of the storm need to take protective measures.
All right, Kevin Corriveau, thank you. And a reminder for all the latest weather updates, make sure you have our free First Alert Weather app downloaded. You can find current conditions straight from our weather team there.